Welcome to Huberman Lab Essentials, where we revisit past episodes to distill the most potent and actionable science-based tools for mental health, physical health, and performance. I'm Andrew Huberman, a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. Today, we're diving into an extraordinarily important topic that's central to our daily lives: motivation. We'll explore the mechanisms behind pleasure and reward, the underpinnings of addiction, the neurochemistry of drive and mindset, and the intricate balance between pleasure and pain that shapes our emotional experiences. This discussion will equip you with practical tools to harness motivation effectively and avoid pitfalls like burnout or addiction. The neuroscience of motivation and reward. Motivation is the engine that drives us to get out of bed, pursue short-term tasks, or chase long-term dreams. It's what keeps us moving forward, whether we're striving for a promotion, training for a marathon, or simply tackling daily chores. At its core, motivation is deeply intertwined with the neurochemistry of movement and reward, and one molecule stands out as the star of this system: dopamine. Dopamine is a fascinating and multifaceted neuromodulator. Discovered in the late 1950s, it was initially identified as a precursor to epinephrine, also known as adrenaline in the body, but referred to as epinephrine in the brain. Epinephrine prepares the body for action by increasing heart rate, dilating blood vessels, and mobilizing energy stores. Early researchers thought dopamine's primary role was to serve as a building block for epinephrine, but it soon became clear that dopamine has its own critical functions. It's not just a stepping stone. It's a powerhouse molecule responsible for both motivation and movement. In fact, dopamine is so central to these processes that disruptions in its function can lead to profound consequences. For example, in Parkinson's disease, the loss of dopamine, producing neurons in the substantia nigra, a brain region involved in movement, results in tremors, stiffness, and difficulty initiating motion. Conversely, excessive dopamine activity in certain brain circuits is implicated in conditions like schizophrenia, where individuals may experience heightened motivation or distorted perceptions of reward. Dopamine is truly a double-edged sword, driving some of the most rewarding aspects of life, such as love, achievement, and creativity, while also lying at the heart of destructive behaviors like addiction. Dopamine and the reward pathway. To understand how dopamine fuels motivation, let's explore the brain's reward pathway, sometimes called the mesolimbic reward pathway. This circuit is the engine behind our desire to act and our experience of pleasure. At its core are two key structures: ventral tegmental area (VTA), located deep in the midbrain. The VTA contains neurons that produce and release dopamine. These neurons send projections, or axons, to other brain regions. Nucleus accumbens, this structure, located in the forebrain, receives dopamine from the VTA and is critical for translating motivation into action. Together, the VTA and nucleus accumbens form the backbone of the reward pathway. When activated, this circuit creates a sense of craving or wanting, biasing us toward action, whether that's reaching for a piece of chocolate, checking social media, or pursuing a career goal. However, the reward pathway doesn't operate in isolation. It's modulated by another critical brain region, the prefrontal cortex, the area behind your forehead responsible for decision making, planning, and impulse control. The prefrontal cortex acts as a brake on the dopamine system, regulating when and how much dopamine is released. This modulation is what allows us to prioritize long-term goals over immediate gratification, resist temptations, and make reasoned decisions. For example, when you're tempted to scroll through social media instead of working on a project, your prefrontal cortex can step in to dampen the dopamine-driven urge, helping you stay focused. This interplay between the accelerator VTA and nucleus accumbens and the brake prefrontal cortex is what makes motivation a dynamic, two-part process. The pleasure-pain balance. Motivation isn't just about chasing pleasure, it's about balancing pleasure and pain. This balance is a fundamental feature of the dopamine system and shapes how we experience emotions, set goals, and navigate challenges. To illustrate this, let's consider how the reward pathway operates under normal conditions. When you're resting or engaged in routine activities, the VTA releases dopamine at a baseline rate of about 3 to 4 pulses per second. This low-level activity maintains a steady state of mild motivation, keeping you alert and engaged with the world. However, when you encounter something exciting, say, the anticipation of a delicious meal, a romantic date, or an upcoming vacation, the reward pathway kicks into high gear. Dopamine firing can increase to 30 or 40 pulses per second, creating a surge of motivation that narrows your focus and propels you toward the desired goal. This surge is what makes anticipation so powerful. Dopamine is less about the pleasure of achieving a goal and more about the craving and wanting that drive you to pursue it. For example, when you're hungry and think about a favorite dish, the dopamine release triggered by that thought motivates you to cook, order food, or head to a restaurant. The actual act of eating may release more dopamine, but the anticipation is often the stronger driver. To quantify this, let's look at how different stimuli affect dopamine levels in the reward pathway. Food. Eating when hungry increases dopamine by about 50% above baseline. Sex. Engaging in sexual activity, a fundamental behavior for species survival, roughly doubles dopamine levels 100% above baseline. Nicotine, smoking or vaping increases dopamine by about 150% above baseline. Cocaine and amphetamines. These drugs cause an explosive 1,0,0,0-fold increase in dopamine within seconds, explaining their highly addictive nature. Interestingly, simply thinking about these stimuli, food, sex, nicotine, or drugs, can trigger dopamine releases comparable to actually engaging with them. For example, a cocaine user may experience a significant dopamine spike just by imagining the drug, though not as intense as the spike from using it. This anticipatory dopamine release is what keeps people motivated to pursue their goals, but it's also what makes addictive behaviors so hard to break. Why addiction happens? The reward pathway didn't evolve to make us addicted. It evolved to ensure our survival by motivating behaviors like eating, drinking, and reproducing. However, modern substances and behaviors, like drugs, social media, and video games, can hijack this system, creating cycles of craving and dependence. The key to understanding addiction lies in the pleasure-pain balance and how it shifts over time. When you engage in a highly rewarding activity, such as eating chocolate or scrolling through social media, the initial dopamine surge feels pleasurable. However, this pleasure is fleeting, and the brain quickly activates a counterbalancing mechanism, a subtle sense of pain or craving for more. This pain isn't physical but psychological, a yearning to repeat the behavior to recapture the initial high. Over time, as you repeatedly engage in the same behavior, the dopamine release diminishes, but the craving pain increases. This is the diabolical nature of the dopamine system. The more you indulge, the less pleasure you feel and the more you crave. In the case of addictive drugs like cocaine or amphetamines, the massive dopamine spikes create an intense pleasure-pain imbalance. The first use produces an unparalleled high, but subsequent uses yield diminishing returns. The brain adapts by downregulating dopamine receptors, making it harder to feel pleasure from everyday activities. Meanwhile, the pain of craving intensifies, driving the individual to seek the drug again and again, not to feel good, but to avoid feeling bad. This cycle explains why addiction is so hard to overcome and why it often requires professional intervention. Social media and video games. Modern technologies like social media and video games are designed to exploit the dopamine system, much like drugs do, though to a lesser extent. Video games, especially those with fast, fast-paced novel content can trigger dopamine releases comparable to nicotine or even cocaine 150-1, 0% above baseline. The constant introduction of new challenges, rewards, and environments keeps players hooked by stimulating the brain's novelty-seeking circuits. Social media operates similarly but with a different pattern. Logging onto a platform like Instagram or X may trigger a significant dopamine spike, especially if you receive likes, comments, or notifications. However, this spike tends to taper off as you continue scrolling, yet many people remain engaged. Why? The intermittent nature of rewards, occasional likes, viral posts, or interesting content creates a gambling-like experience that keeps users coming back. This intermittent reinforcement schedule, where rewards are unpredictable, is one of the most powerful ways to sustain behavior, whether it's gambling, gaming, or checking your phone. Harnessing the here and now molecules. While dopamine drives us to pursue external goals, another set of neuromodulators, sometimes called the here and now molecules, helps us find contentment in the present moment. These include serotonin, oxytocin, endocannabinoids, and prolactin, which are associated with feelings of bliss, satisfaction, and connection. They contrast with dopamine's future-oriented, exterospective focus by anchoring us in the present, fostering interospective awareness of our internal state. For example, serotonin, released from the RAF nuclei in the brainstem, promotes a sense of calm and gratitude for what we already have. It's the molecule of enough, counteracting dopamine's relentless pursuit of more. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, is released during social bonding, such as hugging or spending time with loved ones, and enhances feelings of trust and connection. Endocannabinoids, which bind to the same receptors as cannabis, contribute to a relaxed, blissful state, while prolactin is involved in satiety and nurturing behaviors. The interplay between dopamine and these here and now molecules creates a push-pull dynamic. Dopamine makes us restless, driving us to chase goals beyond our immediate reach, while serotonin and its counterparts encourage us to savor the moment. Striking a balance between these systems is key to a healthy emotional life. Too much dopamine can lead to burnout or addiction, while an overemphasis on serotonin-driven contentment can result in lethargy or lack of ambition. Practical tools for managing motivation. So, how can you leverage this knowledge to enhance motivation, avoid procrastination, and find joy in both pursuit and presence? Here are some science-backed strategies. Understand procrastination types. Stress-driven procrastinators. Some people thrive on the adrenaline of looming deadlines. For them, procrastination is a way to harness stress to boost motivation. If this is you, embrace structured deadlines to channel this tendency productively. Low dopamine procrastinators. Others procrastinate because they lack sufficient dopamine to initiate action. For these individuals, strategies to boost dopamine naturally, such as breaking tasks into small, achievable steps or using positive visualization, can help. Consult a healthcare provider about supplements like L-tyrosine or mucuna pruriens, a source of L-dopa, a dopamine precursor, or medications like Wellbutrin, which increases dopamine and norepinephrine. Extend the dopamine arc. To sustain motivation without crashing, focus on prolonging the positive feelings associated with achievements. For example, after publishing a paper or hitting a fitness goal, reflect on the journey, the people involved, and the satisfaction of the process. This cognitive reframing extends the dopamine release, offsetting the pain of craving more. Practice mindfulness for presence. Engage in practices that shift your focus from dopamine-driven pursuit to serotonin-driven contentment. For example, try a mindfulness exercise like eating a single almond slowly, savoring its taste and texture. This trains your brain to find joy in the present, balancing the pleasure-pain dynamic. Leverage intermittent reinforcement. To maintain long-term motivation, adopt an intermittent reward schedule. Instead of celebrating every milestone, occasionally downplay or skip the reward. For example, if you're working toward a fitness goal, don't treat yourself after every workout. Save celebrations for unpredictable intervals. This mimics the slot machine effect, keeping you engaged without burning out your dopamine system. Manage expectations. Your subjective expectations can powerfully influence dopamine release. In a fascinating study, college students given 200 mg of caffeine performed better on cognitive tasks when they believed they were taking Adderall, a stronger stimulant. Use this to your advantage by setting positive, realistic expectations for tasks. Visualize success and frame challenges as opportunities to boost motivation. Explore supplements with caution. Phenylethylamine PA, an over-the-counter supplement, may enhance both dopamine and serotonin in release, promoting mental acuity and well-being. However, responses vary and it acts as a mild stimulant, so consult a healthcare provider before trying it. Balance pursuit and rest. High achievers often struggle with the what's next mentality after major successes. To avoid dopamine crashes, incorporate practices that activate the here and now molecules, such as meditation, deep breathing, or spending time with loved ones. Prioritize sleep, as it restores both dopamine and serotonin systems, enhancing overall emotional resilience. The dopamine schedule experiment, a landmark experiment, illustrates the distinction between pleasure and motivation, offering insights into how to control the dopamine system. Researchers gave rats access to a lever that dispensed food pellets they enjoyed. Normal rats pressed the lever, ate the food, and repeated the behavior, indicating both pleasure and motivation. However, when dopamine neurons were destroyed using a neurotoxin, the rats could still enjoy the food if it was placed directly in front of them, but they wouldn't move even one body length to press the lever. This showed that dopamine is not about experiencing pleasure, but about the motivation to pursue it. This finding has profound implications. If you feel unmotivated or meh about life, it may reflect low dopamine activity rather than an inability to enjoy things. While clinical depression may require professional treatment, e.g., therapy, medication, or both, milder cases of low motivation can often be addressed through lifestyle changes, cognitive strategies, or supplements that support dopamine production.